was not made a paramount chief until 2 years before my father and mother got married. But when I was born, he was already a paramount chief. That's why I was born at Rutifunka.
And what is your affiliation? Are you a Timney? Are you a Chevro? I'm confused.
Well, as I'm trying to tell people from the beginning, my family belongs everywhere. My father was a migrant person from somewhere, sub-Sahara, but settled in Sierra Leone at a town called Rokel, on the Rokel River. But being there long enough, he must have been Mandingo or Kuranko. But being there long enough, he became the Timney, and he got married to the daughter of one of the Timney chiefs. So that's where my father was born. But my father's mother was a member of another chiefdom, the Masimra chiefdom, which was a Timney local chiefdom farther down the river. So those are ancestors on my father's side. On my mother's side, Chevro, her father was a Chevro paramount chief, but her mother came from northern Sierra Leone, from Binti, the same area where the Wuris come from. So she was Fula in that sense. It was a Fulani group at a place called, oh, I forget now. At my age, I have a face here. Anyway, that's where she came from. But in those days, people had that exchange. A leader up in the north would send one of his daughters or thing to be married to somebody in the south so that they'd have a tribal alliance. So my mother came and got married to this Chevro person, and so my mother was born there. So we have that background. But at the same time, on the Chevro side, the Coca side, they're also related, as you probably will find out, to the Massacoys, who are a Vai family. And, so we just say we belong everywhere. Although our language, our mother tongue was Timney.
Now, did you went to primary school at Rotofunk?
I went to primary school in Rotofunk until grade 7. They didn't call it, they called it standard in those days, standard 7. And then, because my older brother, who had preceded me, had gone to Albert Academy, it's not because of that, I had to anyway, because my father was a Methodist minister, and Albert Academy was a Methodist school. It was not called Methodist in those days, it was called United Brethren.
Right.
United Brethren School. They founded Albert Academy in 1904. And so that's where the family, you know. So I went to Albert Academy for high school, secondary school. It was strange because although it was in Freetown, it did not follow the British system of education, being an American school. We did not have what they had in the British schools, or teach what they taught, Latin and Greek and things like that. We followed the American freshman, sophomore, junior, senior in high school. And so I went there for 4 years and then went on to Freemake College. That finished my education in Sierra Leone.
Well, let's go back to Albert Academy. What were your first reactions when you came from Rotofunk to Freetown, big city?
Well, it was not new because after all, with my grandfather's pension, he had houses in Freetown.
Oh, okay.
And we used to come there on holidays and things. And so it was not new to us. And also my father, being a United Brethren minister, would come there for annual conferences every year, the annual church conference. And occasionally we would come with him, with our mother. Other times we would come alone. So Freetown was not new to us.
Freemake College, what was it like when you went there?
That was very interesting. Freemake College was very interesting. The only reason I went there was because while in my senior year at Albert Academy, the principal of Freemake College, James Lawrence Cecil Hosted, came to give a talk to us. He was principal of Freemake College. He was canon of the Church Missionary Society, which is Anglican. And in talking, he said, you know, we've never had, as far as I can remember, anyone from Albert Academy. And we'll be glad to have somebody from Albert Academy. So he said, if any of you qualify sometime and apply, we probably can take you at Freemake College. So,
which is strange since it's right down the road from Albert Academy.
Freemake College?
Fourbe?
No, no, no.
Oh, it wasn't there then?
No, Harvard Academy was on the way to Mount to
Oh,
Leicester.
and that was the old Fourbe.
On the way to Leicester.
Yeah.
That was the old Freemake.
Uh-huh.
On the bay. The bay after which the college was named.
Uh-huh.
Bay College. And Freemake College was a branch of Durham University in England. That's the connection. Anyway, when I graduated, I was too young to go do the usual missionary. Everybody from Harvard Academy went off country to teach in the mission schools. I was too young, so my father and the superintendent said, well, what can we do? Unless you send him to my place where I was pastor, my father told the superintendent, we cannot send him to teach in some place at his age. But then we remembered that the principal of Freemake College had said if we tried, but then how could I enter Freemake College with the American qualification? I had not qualified the British way. So we talked to the principal. He said, well, you know, you try and see if you can pass the Durham University matriculation. But have you studied Latin? I said, no, we have no Latin at Harvard Academy. We had a little French. So he said, why don't you try anyway? So they agreed, my father and the mission people agreed that I should go to Freemake College, and he had admitted me in preparation for matriculation. And in 6 months, I mastered enough Latin to pass the matriculation examination. So he said, well, now you matriculated, I invited you all to come, so I'll give you a scholarship, but you'll have to work for it. Unfortunately for me, one of the American teachers at Harvard Academy had taught us Greek shorthand. So I knew how to do shorthand. And he said, well, you're the only student here who can take shorthand, why don't you be my secretary? So I became the secretary of the principal of Freemake College. Incidentally, he later became the Bishop of Sierra Leone and the Archbishop of West Africa, and he was my very, very close friend.
What was his name?
James Lawrence Cecil Horsted.
Then you went on to teach at Bunumbu.
After I graduated from Freemake College,
Okay.
being another thing, I went to Bunumbu. I was the first African member of the staff at Bunumbu. The others were all one English missionary, 2 English missionaries, one government person, Englishman, who left the government service and agreed to teach there. Bunumbu was a teacher's training college, incidentally. So I went there to join the staff. So there were 4 of us on the staff at Bunumbu College.
You were there for 2 years? About 2 years you were there?
I was there 2 years, yes, and then I left to come to this country to do pre-med.
Now let me ask you a question I was curious about. You went to McGill. Was that? No, I'm sorry. You went to Otterbein first.
Otterbein is where I went for pre-med.
For pre-med.
I don't know science either from Freemake College or Harvard.
Yeah.
Harvard Academy, we did a little biology, but that was not enough. So in order to get to medical school in this country, which was the intention, I had to go to a pre-med school. And I went to this place in Westerville, Ohio, just north of Columbus, which was United Brethren College, which is very famous. Otterbein College and Oberlin College, also in Ohio, both claim between themselves that 2 things. One, they were the first colleges to admit women on an equal basis as men, and secondly, they were the first to admit black people in Ohio, which was not a completely black college.
What was your experience like at Otterbein?
Oh, very good. I enjoyed it. I did nothing since I already had a Bachelor of Arts degree from England, in English and history and all those things. I was past the graduate standards. Anyway, but I had to do science, so I spent all my time doing the pre-med sciences, anatomy, comparative anatomy, physiology, bacteriology, and that sort of thing. But my professor said, we know what you've come for, you just concentrate. So in 2 years I got a Bachelor of Science degree, having had a BA before from Freemake College.
Now that was 1940.
I went there in 1938.
38.
I left Bunumbu in 38, I went there. But in 1940 then I applied, you have to get this right, I applied to all the medical schools that my professors thought I would get into. But one after the other they said, sorry, the excuse was usually we don't have room, we have too many. But the fact was that very few black students in the United States could get into a white medical school. That's why they had 2 black medical schools, one at Meharry in, is it Kentucky? Nashville, Tennessee, and one at Howard University in Washington. So failing the others, all of whom said they had no room for me, I applied to both of them. They also said, yes, we are very much interested, your records are good, but you know, we have hundreds of our own people here who are applying, and you've come from Africa. You might go on the waiting list, but we cannot admit you now. Then one of my professors said, we've been stupid. Look, you have a British citizenship, you're a British subject, Canada is over there, why don't we apply to Canada? So we applied to Canada, and remarkably, in 2 weeks' time, I got admission to medical school, when I'd been turned down by all the medical schools in this country. So off to Canada I went.
Up to Canada. How did you find Montreal?
Montreal was also very interesting. Probably the second largest city in Canada at that time. French speaking mostly, but there was a little part of it which was English.
Did you speak French?
I had learned a little thing that Manley had taught us, but nothing to say but that, hello, how are you? So, but anyway, I learned in 4 years I was at McGill, I learned to speak French. So French became my second language. But anyway, I got there, and 4 years medical school. But the interesting thing that happened, which also had a lot to do with my future, was that I got there just when the Canadians were already at war, because they were part of the British war. And when I was in Otterbein College, I got to know about this because, you know, we can get into that later as you ask questions. Anyway, I got there, but in the second year, the Canadian government decided that they had to train more doctors to go to the Far East, because the Canadian soldiers had been captured by the Japanese, and they thought it was their obligation to fight the war in the Far East in addition to Europe, so that they could free the Canadian soldiers who were imprisoned. So everyone in medical school was forced, well not forced, what would you say, was inducted into the army, and they took over. That means they took over. We were then members of the Canadian Army. They paid our school fees, they paid everything for us, because we were in training, we were cadets. And then on graduation, we were commissioned into the Canadian Army, getting ready to be shipped over and this is where an interesting part of my story comes. Since I was not a Canadian citizen, and before shipping people overseas, they usually gave them home leave, right, to go and say goodbye at home. So they said, well, we see your home is in Africa, so off you go to Africa on home leave. So they paid for my way. I went to a very interesting way back home. From Montreal, we got on one of these ships which were transatlantic. We stopped in Bermuda, we stopped in Trinidad, we went down to Brazil, and from Brazil we went across the Atlantic, stopping in Ascension Island, landed in Ghana, Gold Coast it was called then. From Gold Coast I went up to Freetown, and when I arrived in Freetown, what a sensation there was this man who went to study medicine, discovered Canadian Army medical officer of all things. And so I had my 2 weeks, I went to Rotifund, my mother was there, all the Cocker family assembled and said goodbye to me.
You were wearing a uniform?
Oh, I had to wear a uniform, I was in uniform.
You were a major?
No, she started in the beginning as a lieutenant, until you get further up in the rank. Anyway, but my Freetown fellows who'd been Boy Scouts with me, some of them had gone to England and were also, and some of them would happen to be in Freetown, and we had a very good liaison. And the more of the story I put in, and there was. Anyway, after the 2 weeks, I went back the same way I came, because that was the only way to return, because it was free army transportation. Yeah. But when I got back home, they assigned me, because we were not quite ready to go, at a receiving station where people had been wounded in the European War. And we received them and went through, examined them and decided whether they were to go home or were to go to a hospital. It was while I was there that VJ Day came along. And so I was free.
That was it.
So I went to them and I said, look, I only came here to medical school. You told me I had to join the army because of the war. Now the war is over. Can I go back home? They said, yes, willingly.